Good evening. I'd like to call the regular City Commission meeting to order and ask all of you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we can start with the approval of the agenda, I would like to make a couple of changes. If we could move item number 11 to the first item of business, and then item number 10 to the second, and then proceed with the agenda as it is presented.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we approve this evening's agenda, moving item number 11 to item number 1 and item number 10 to item number 2.
Support.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have two sets of minutes, the special meeting of June 12th and the regular meeting of June 12th, 2018. Actually, we have three. Is that true?
Yes.
And the special meeting minutes of June 26th.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of June 12th, special meeting June 12th, regular meeting June 12th, and special meeting on the 26th of June.
Support.
Any comments, questions, or changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. No communications. And our county commissioner is not with us this evening, or any other elected officials for that matter. So we'll move on to public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on an item that is not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll close public participation and move on to our regular items of business, starting with a matter of consideration of the off-street parking waiver.
A few years ago, the city amended the off-street parking ordinance in an effort to eliminate as many off-street parking spaces as possible, and part of that ordinance was when a road was being reconstructed, the off-street parking space would be removed at the city's expense, and that the homeowner had the opportunity to apply for a waiver if they wanted to have that off-street parking space installed again. There were certain requirements in terms of size and the material for the off-street parking space, but there needed to be a practical difficulty or some sort of hardship in order for the commission to grant that waiver. So Matthew and Erica McManus, although their address is on Hendry, their off-street parking spaces are on Salem, and that is slated for reconstruction. In fact, we've already started this summer. So they are here to ask for a waiver to be able to reinstall another off-street parking space.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Matt McManus. It's my wife Erica. And we do indeed hope that we can get a waiver for the side parking. I will mention that it has been very helpful for the front loader that has been moving the gravel and the sand for this construction project to have our side drive there. Otherwise they would have been all over our yard if there was yard there. So just saying, I noticed a practicality there recently. It's testing, but we're excited about the road getting done for sure. My wife and I have lived in this house for 15 years. Our children were 3 and 1 when we moved there. The side drive predates our ownership of the home by a couple owners, I think, and have been there a long time. I'll admit that we're used to using it, and it's been very convenient. And I think one of the conveniences it provides is it keeps more cars off the road. And in particular, that street, that section of Salem between Huntington and Hendry, it serves as a switchback in our neighborhood and is a very common cut through for people from the fence line to the interior on the east end of the town, and vice versa going out to 696. Some people go that way as well. So we are very busy in that small segment of street at the rush hours, especially in the afternoons. And so I think it's been useful to have our cars off the road, at least our cars off the road there, to provide a wider thoroughfare, because it does get kind of busy there, I'll be honest with you. When our kids, when we moved there, our kids were young. It didn't mean as much to us with regard to just the four of us, but now I have kids that are older, a young adult and an older teenager. They're all drivers. We have 4 drivers in the house, and the actual driveway that we have is very short. It's from the entry to our garage to the sidewalk is 16 feet. And in order for us to get all our cars up and out of the way, I think it's likely that we'll very often obstruct the sidewalk, which I don't think is an ideal circumstance, not in a city like ours where people walk their dogs and their kids all the time. So I think it kind of makes sense just because of the shortness of our driveway. And our house has 2 entries actually in the front. We have one front entry on Hendry and one on Salem, and they actually come together in a combined foyer. And so that side door is used quite a bit for us. In fact, almost all our traffic comes out of that, in and out of that side door. And having the driveway there, the side drive available to us is, I have to admit, very convenient. And it seems almost like it makes sense, to be honest with you, because of the layout of our house. We can't park in front of our house. We have to park across the street because of the, one side, the fire lane we always keep in the city. And we would really like the opportunity to keep it in some form, whatever form the commission thinks is appropriate. And we would do whatever it takes to get that done. We appreciate it.
Do we have any comments from the commission?
Mr. Mayor, I just would be curious, have we talked to public safety and do we know exactly how many, if they were to park on street, how many they'd qualify for, how many spots on the street they would qualify for? I'd be curious.
At this point, it looks like 2 different scenarios. One is they'd be eligible for an overnight parking permit because their driveway is short. And then secondly, we also allow people to park overnight when there are more cars registered to an address than there is room either in the garage or the driveway. So most likely, they would be eligible and they would receive 2 overnight parking permits.
Thank you.
Just a question. Is there any relief that could be given, I do believe the circumstances are a little unique, any relief that could be given by maybe extending the sidewalk to give them a little more space in their driveway, jogging the sidewalk when
Moving the sidewalk
replacing,
closer to the street?
right, so that they could fully park in their driveway and people could still walk around it without being obstructed.
Well, there would be an expense to taking out the sidewalk where it is right now, especially if you were gonna go all the way down Salem from Hendry to Huntington in order to accommodate that. That would,
I think that would be a very bad precedent to set. I mean, look, do I gather you can get, when the right-of-ways came out over a period of years, when we got away from them. I don't know if you followed the history of this at all, but this goes back probably 10, 12 years. We're trying to figure out how they got there. And it was sort of like, I don't know. Well, who allowed that? I don't know.
Right.
Well, who put that in? I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's there. And you had people putting them in on their own, and that's city property. That's not private property. And when Steve Fairman was police chief, director of public safety, he was vehemently opposed to on-street parking overnight. He believed that it was not a good idea, and he would not approve it, because at the time, other people said, well, why don't we allow people to buy a permit? If they want to park in the street, park in the street. It's no big deal. And so now, under Chief Pazikowski, he likes it. He likes it, and he said it's fine. So that has been the answer to the off-street parking, if you will. And it isn't a question of you. It's a question of, okay, if you say, well, these are really nice people, we're going to do. Then the next person comes in as well. Well, what about us? We're nice people too. Now, since we banned them largely. There's only been one circumstance that I can think of, and it was on a street where the house is on the corner. There's no parking in front of the house on the one street and no parking on the street next to it. So they're out. So that, as far as is my work, unless anybody recalls differently.
Well, there were two waivers we've granted so far.
Okay, but there were extreme circumstances where there was nowhere else. So, in reading it, you use the word my preference. And I understand that, but, you can't base public policy and stuff like that on preference. I understand, I understand. And I mean, I've heard a lot of folks come in and say, well, it's been there for years and stuff. Great. Like I said, when this whole effort began, I was on the ZBA and, people, guy put one in on his own and then decided to come in and ask for a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals for a right-of-way parking spot on public property. So I mean, I don't want you to think that that they bias, if you will, or the not bias, but the feeling against them is arbitrary and capricious. It's trying to be uniform and trying to be, across the board fair to people. So.
Well, I really do believe that our driveway is short enough to, I really do believe our driveway is short enough to constitute an exception. So I know for a fact there's an existing right-of-way parking spot around the corner from me. It's a friend of mine, and I'm
Talking about on Huntington?
not gonna, yes, I am. And, his driveway will accommodate at least 4 cars. He's got a long driveway. So, it's hard for me to look at that. And
I'm
see
well
that,
aware of your
that
point.
there can't be an understanding of my situation.
I'm well aware of your point in that regard, and that was done before we addressed it in a uniform fashion, and I'm aware of your point, and it's a good point.
But they just redid that street too, and they didn't have to take it out.
Yeah, so I'm just a little confused again, because they did just redo the street, they did maintain that right-of-way parking in a scenario where they frankly probably don't need it. And so, it seems like a conflict there. I mean, we have lived in this town for almost 20 years. We remember when this started getting, becoming a conversation point again, and, we have been paying for our license every year since that decision was made, and, so I think that we've done what we can, and I understand that we're trying as a master plan for the city, change the look of it and get rid of some of these things that maybe weren't so necessary, but I really honestly believe that mine is necessary.
The 2 vehicles, are these your kids' cars that you want to park on the
Yeah.
drive?
Mhm.
And do those vehicles fit on the drive?
Well, they barely fit. They usually, an end of it's gonna hang into the sidewalk, if I actually try to get it up on that part of the road.
Hanging, we dealt with that issue too, which you raised, the business of obstructing. If you park on the driveway, is the sidewalk accessible for pedestrian use? If someone's walking on the...
It's obstructed. Can you get around the cars? Sure, because you can walk around on the apron of the short part of the drive there, but...
They cannot walk on the sidewalk without walking on the apron?
Not with the current, if I get a smart car, they probably could, but with the current vehicles that we have, it's unlikely that they're gonna be able to walk straight ahead without veering.
So this is pretty typical that corner lots have small driveways, and we do have a permitting process for people to be able to park on the street overnight if
Right.
there's not enough room in their driveway to park their cars.
You know the situation on Huntington?
I
Is
don't
that
know which
something that
one.
came before
I do
us?
know that as part of the, Huntington Road was paved before the ordinance was adopted, and then
Okay.
when the ordinance was adopted, there were specific provisions in it that those homes on Huntington, because the reconstruction is gonna be so far off that when those current homeowners move out, the city will at that time take out the off-street parking space.
At our expense.
The difference with some of the other applicants is that we do have a remedy in place for your particular home because of the on-street parking. That's the difficult we have
Okay.
in giving this exception, so, just so you understand.
Well, I appreciate your consideration.
Any public comment? Do we have a motion first?
Public comment. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you for allowing public comment. My name's Dennis Kays. I live on Salem. I live in a very dirty house right now, with the trucks speeding by, with the construction, and the people. You'd think they would drive slower, but they don't. In any event, I was here a couple months ago asking for my own waiver. I believe that this family is entitled to their waiver. I believe that Salem, no matter where you are on Salem, is a very narrow street with cars going back and forth between Lincoln and Huntington, Lincoln and Hendry, Huntington going back and forth all the time. It's a through road. That we do not have enough parking. It's a narrow street. Across from my house is a fire hydrant. You can't even park across from my house because there's a fire hydrant. In any event, I believe that this variance, this permit should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
To be consistent, but not to be unfair, I think I'd move that we deny the request for the right-of-way parking spot.
I'll second it.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Jenks?
We're trying to ticket anyone that obstructs the sidewalks to get that stopped so it's safe, especially in the wintertime, so it's safe that kids are not, little kids especially, riding out in the street. If we granted your variance, we would still have a problem. So, I mean, I will be voting against it because it is not a current solution. We're trying to make the city safer. Now, one of the reasons the chief didn't like cars on the street is you could really easily check any car on the street and see if it was something that didn't belong there, because if you had a guess, you reported they were gonna be there. Otherwise, it made it easy to make sure that you didn't have robbers and stuff like that, problems. But because they're really, although right now you don't obstruct the street, if that's removed, there is no solution. We are trying to remove those spaces from every house in the city when the road is torn up. And I mean, again, the house around the corner was done after, before we did that.
No, the Huntington was just done. Okay, and they have a huge driveway, whatever, we're talking about consistency in making decisions. That's what we're discussing. And that street was recently done, and they have a long
It's actually
driveway.
been at least 5 years since
Yeah.
Huntington was done.
It's
I'm
been
not
a
sure
while,
the
it was
exact
long
year.
before we
A lot of
amended.
people lost their spots on Huntington as well.
Yeah, that's right, and I'm not disagreeing with your point
That's
on
not
that.
consistent though.
Well, but when the street was done and the spots were allowed back in, it was not by ordinance. In other words, it had nothing to do with us. The city manager allowed those spots to go back in. And that's the problem with that kind of stuff. And not this city manager, her predecessor. That's exactly what happened, to be absolutely blunt. And, I just don't have any use for ad hoc, okay for you, no, not okay for you. We're trying to get this uniformity here, and the trade-off here is the on-street parking. That's the trade-off. Previously, that was not permitted because the police chief did not want it. He did not want police cars having to go down the street and look to see if there was a sticker. Like I said, change of police chiefs. Andrew Pazukowski says, no problem. He doesn't see a problem with it. That's the difference between the situation then and now. I understand your point. I agree with your point. But those situations on Huntington occurred before the change in the ordinance.
Okay, but it's still, you could be just swapping one problem for another. We live right there on the corner. We park 2 cars right there by the yield sign or by the stop sign. It obstructs people.
Can you, Ms. McManus, let me ask you a question. Can you cite a single example of a property damage accident on your street involving a parked vehicle?
Oh, because we don't park in the street.
No, I mean.
I don't pay attention to what's
I
going
know,
on.
but that's what I mean. It's like saying, well, it's the argument, well, it's safer, we don't want the cars, in the street and stuff like that. Or Mr. Key's comments about, well, there's a lot of cars on Salem and so forth. I get all that. I've lived here 40 years. I know. And I agree with the speeding part too. But from the perspective of empirical data or evidence, are you aware of a single incident where a vehicle parked in the street on
I'll
Salem?
look into it.
Because I'm not, and and when people say, well, there's a lot of issues of a lot of traffic, so forth, that's fine, but it's kind of like the where you see the commentary from folks on Nextdoor about we ought to have this or we ought to have that. When you're going to do these kind of traffic things, if somebody say, yeah, there were 3 cars there and they all got hit or something, then there's something to talk about. But in the absence of that, I said the goal isn't to be unfair or unreasonable. The goal is to be uniform. So I don't. It's not a matter of being arbitrary or capricious. It's a matter of being uniform.
Okay.
So I guess that my question before you finish is, does that mean that I'm gonna be paying annually for 2 parking permits
For cars?
in the street?
Sure. No, well, I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah,
that doesn't seem really
That's not fair.
appropriate.
It's the same $100 that you paid for
Well, we
the
paid 2.
off-street parking space, right? You have 2 different scenarios.
So we're gonna be penalized because our driveway's not long enough now. Twice.
I
It's,
mean, that's essentially what it comes.
Or accommodated, depending on how you look at it. You pay for the right-of-way parking spot, don't you?
And yeah, but I have a lot more space.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to deny the parking waiver request. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is a discussion of funding options for the sewer repair program.
yes, there are actually 2 different items I'd like to discuss tonight with the city commission. The first is whether or not the city wants to consider using state revolving fund financing through the state of Michigan. Commission had asked for an analysis of that process versus bonding on the open market. We were able to provide that to you, and it's in your packet. Secondly, once the decision is made about whether or not to seek state revolving fund financing, there's 2 scenarios that are under consideration for the sewer repair project. One would be to bond for all of the repairs, approximately $1,300, all at once, and do the repairs over $13 million. What'd I say?
$1,500?
Let's do it right now.
Repairs.
$13 million and do it over the next 5 years. The second scenario would be to bond only for the most critical repairs that we need to do sewer replacement, and then ask the long-range budget committee to consider the best timing and the best funding method for the remainder of the repairs, perhaps in conjunction with the remaining roads that need to be done. And if that's the direction that the city commission is interested in, then I would suggest that we bring on a financial consultant to help us look at the different scenarios with road construction and sewer construction, because the amount that you would need to bond for depends on when those construction projects are gonna be done, and there turns into a lot of moving part. So to help us with our discussion today, we've got our Director of Public Works, Rocco is here, if there's any questions about the construction aspect of the project. And then we also have Bobby Benzinski and Stephen Hayduck here from Benzinski and Company to talk about the bonding options that that are before you. And laid out at the table tonight is additional information. We had asked the Benzinski and Company to prepare what the estimated millage rate would be for just doing the replacement work, which is around $5 million, with a 10-year bond, a 15-year bond, and a 20-year bond to help with your discussion tonight. So why don't we start with the state revolving fund? Were there any questions about that process that we can answer?
Mr. Mayor, so based on my understanding, using the state revolving fund, any benefit of the lower interest rate is outweighed by the additional engineering costs. Is that how this all came out in calculation, by understanding it correctly?
Yes, there are two things that add to the cost that you don't incur if you sell bonds on the open market. One is a rather expensive project plan. Needs to be put together by the engineering company, and I've listed the different areas that project plan costs. That cost is anywhere from an additional $30,000 to $50,000. And then if the project, or if the funding is approved, then in order to seek reimbursement from the state for the work that's done by the contractor, there's substantial paperwork that needs to be turned in. And so the engineers typically increase their costs for engineering fees in order to accommodate the additional time that they're going to need to prepare that paperwork. So we did have, again, Benzinski and Company run the cost using state revenue funding and adding the engineering costs versus the cost of going out on an open market for the bond.
Amy?
Also, I'm going to add, and then we'll get to you, that the only part of the sewer project that would be
That's right.
potentially able to be done through the state revolving fund would be the repair.
Replacement.
The replacement.
Right.
The relining and the bursting will not qualify for state revolving fund. And also, the application for that would be due on July 1st, 2019. So it would delay the project at least 2 years if we were approved.
That in and of itself, Mr. Mayor, in my opinion, is a non-starter. I mean, we are not going to wait that long to get started on this. It's, we missed the July 1 deadline this year. Based on the report we received from our engineers at the last meeting, that's a non-starter in my opinion. I mean, even with the increased engineering costs and all of that, it was certainly worth exploring in my opinion. We've explored it, and I don't think it's anything that I'd be interested in pursuing.
Mayor, thank you.
Yes.
Madam City Manager and Council, I just want to give you a little heads up on the SRF program. It's a little different than what you have been used to seeing. You historically have voted bond issues. You sell bonds in one or more series. You get all that money. You spend that money for what that ballot proposal says. Roads. You dictate whether it's this street, that street, whatever. Under the state program, the SRF funding, you, as City Manager Sullivan explained, that you file a plan. They say you can do this, you can't do that. Maybe you want to build a bigger pump station at some location because there's issues at some time, big rains or something. They may say no, that doesn't qualify. You can't do that, or you have to pay that out of your pocket. It's a drawdown basis. So what they approve when you borrow, you do a borrowing. They call it a loan, and even though it's a bond issue, it's just like any other bond issue, except you do not get your money at the beginning. They give it to you on a drawdown basis. That's why the engineers ask for additional expenses, because they have additional administrative responsibility at that time, because they're filing the paperwork to get the drawdown. So you spend the money, you get an invoice, you bill the state, they give you the money, you pay the contractor. So it takes time. It is currently at 2.5%. that could go up. You may or may not qualify for that funding. It depends on how many people apply for that money. There's only so much money each year that's allocated. You are correct that you had to apply by July 1. You've missed that deadline, which, you know, how much money will be asked for next July? Who knows? You know, if large cities such as Detroit, Flint file, you could be, you know, without money because it's a priority system. So that's the drawback to the SRF. Yes, you are. The earliest you could get funded would be December of 19. That's the earliest because it's a state fiscal year program, which is October 1, September 30th. So they fund every quarter. So it's December, March, June, and August, or September, excuse me.
Okay. Commissioner Jenks.
I saw that there'd be $105,000 in additional engineering costs for filing and stuff like that. But I also saw that the final expense to the city would be $760,000 different minus the 105. So, you know, there's over 600,000.
Are you looking at the interest cost?
I'm looking at your quotation for principal and interest. You show total principal and interest
Which schedule?
payments.
Interest cost, right.
Yeah.
Because they're, right now, this year's program is guaranteed at 2.5%.
Okay.
This program started in the mid-90s. It has never been higher than 2.5%. So we don't use anything higher than 2.5%, which is the current rate. Could it go up? It's all about how much the state gets from the federal government. This program was designed, and tells you how old I am, because they cut out the federal grant funding. In the 70s and 80s, they gave a grant. It was 75% grant, 5% state grant, 80% total. Locals, being municipalities, had to fund 20%. Well, they cut that out in the 80s. And then they created this program, the state revolving program for both. They call it clean water, which is sewer. And then they call it drinking water, which is the water that comes out of our taps. And they designed this with a low interest rate financing. It's all about how much the state gets from the feds and how much they can leverage. But, you know, again, you may not qualify. Depends on how many people apply for that money. I mean, my recommendation is to decide what you want to do for projects, okay? Design the ballot proposition to cover that. I would recommend that we use the millage numbers at a open market rate, okay? Because that's going to be your highest rate. We have an obligation. You have an obligation when you adopt the ballot language to put in there what you reasonably expect to be the best scenario and the best interest rate. If you apply for SRF funding and you get qualified, then you proceed down that road. If not, then you have the other option of doing open market securities. And, you know, how much you want to do, that's up to you. That's not up to us. We're here to tell you what it will cost you, not what you should do. Your engineers tell you what you should do because what you need to do. We're not that smart. We're smart with numbers.
Mr. Mayor? So, I mean, this funding is basically only to be used for the absolute worst parts of our sewer system. The parts that are going to require complete replacement.
For the SRF?
That's right.
Correct.
They've either collapsed or are non-functioning, and, you know, Mr. Bazinski's indicated that, you know, December, we would receive funding. Well, I don't think we're gonna be digging and replacing sewer lines in December, which really realistically doesn't allow us to start replacing failed sections of the sewer system until 2020, you know, in the spring of 2020. That is just too long. It's too long. In my opinion, this has gone on long enough. We do not want to prolong it any longer. Like I said, I certainly appreciated looking at all the different funding mechanisms, but I just don't see us being able to do this and put it off until 2020.
And even at 2020, you're talking at least 2 years. Our engineer said maybe 3 years to do this $5 million worth of work in the community. So you're really talking 5 years before we're completed with repairing the major issues in our sewer system. I would agree with Commissioner Rozell that the state revolving fund is just puts us too far behind in addressing these major issues with our sewer system.
I share that view.
And I don't agree with not using it and putting a burden of $1,200 additional per household.
I disagree with that conclusion from the paperwork that's in front of us, although the interest rate, the interest that we would pay over the period of time is less, the other fees actually cause the program to cost more money.
This is showing you that construction, engineering, and contingency using SRF is gonna be $5.19 million. It also shows you that going to the open market, assuming we can still get good rates there, is gonna cost you $5.085 million. The calculations on the next page are not based on some hypothetical. They're based upon 5.085 million in the open market, and they're based on the higher price using the SRF if we're able to get it. One of the negatives on the SRF is that it's a 20-year bond, and these others have some other options. But these are both calculated on the difference in costs about the effort that we need to take for either project. So there is a $760,000 difference in what the taxpayers are asked to pay.
Yeah, the difference in the millage rate is, I had to do it, minimal.
Mils, right?
I'm looking at the average. The difference is 0.0837 mils.
That means how much per average household if it's a taxable value of 150,000.
$12.
A year?
Mr. Mayor, I would just echo what my colleagues have said. I don't think this is something we can wait on. This is 2014 is when this happened. 2018, if we wait for 2 more years, we just cannot risk having anything between now and then for that small amount.
Yeah, for $12.
Yeah.
Okay, with that covered.
Okay.
Should we move on to?
Yes. The second item is the time period or the amount of money that the city commission is comfortable asking the voters for in November for a bond, and the amount of work to tackle right away.
Well, as the engineers presented to us at the last meeting, it's approximately $4.5 million worth of repair work for the major issues in the sewer system, which takes us up to around 5.1 million with the bonding costs and other engineering fees involved to address that issue. And that's a program that if we tackled immediately would still take us 2 to 3 years. It doesn't address the $1.4 million worth of piping that needs to be relined and the $7 million worth of piping that they're recommending bursting.
Now, the relining, we think we could handle with the proceeds from the water fund, the charge that's levied, the flat rate that's levied on the water bill, we could do that over the next 5 to 6 years. So the relining could be covered with water fund funds. The replacement would be the bond, so it would be the pipe bursting, which is the $6.5 million worth of work that needs to be done. That would be referred to the long-range budget committee to take into consideration with the amount of money that's also gonna be needed to reconstruct the rest of the roads.
And I don't see that as a delay because we couldn't take on that project and the replacement project at the same time. I think it's a better approach to ask the long-range study committee to look at all our infrastructure, the roads, that part of the sewer system, water mains, and give us a comprehensive plan to take to the community a year from now when we get their report.
Mayor, I'm in agreement with those comments. I also think that initially I was in favor of one sort of infrastructure bond, right? And that we asked the voters to do roads and sewers in sort of one massive ballot proposal and we move forward. But two things. One is exactly what you said, that we can't do this all right away anyway. And number two, if we're gonna put even the $4 million, any question we're gonna put before the voters this November, we've got 30 days to decide, and there's no way that we can get back some type of road plan as to what roads are gonna need to be done and what that cost would be in 30 days. So really moving forward with the entire bonding and selling one massive bond issue just isn't feasible at this point because we're not prepared to do that. And so I think, as you've indicated, the initial bond sale of roughly $4 million, $5 million makes sense. And then we can go to the vote, fully explain what we're doing, and then go to the voters for a subsequent bond issue for the remaining part and the roads. It'll also be easier, you know, in my opinion, on the taxpayers in that they're not going to have such a huge upfront cost, and it's something that we can ease in, you know, over time. So I initially was not supportive of that, but as I thought about it, I think it makes the most sense at this point.
Commissioner Jenks.
Yeah, we have finished our road bonding. How will that impact our millage? In other words, if we refunded or refinanced approved a new set of bonds subject to, if we approved a new set of bonds for roads, and we use that to replace the expiring millage, is that going to add to the expense of the local taxpayer?
Yes, a new bond for the sewers, there's gonna be a millage associated with that, and then if sometime in the future there's an additional bond that's approved for roads, sewers, or a combination thereof, there's gonna be millage required for that. We don't have bonds falling off for,
Like 2027 or around there.
for
Start
several
going off.
years.
Okay, so in other words, we're gonna wait 2 years to deal with roads, as I understand it, because you'll bring a bond issue next year.
Actually,
And then-
we're only gonna wait 1 year because we have road construction going on this
This
year. So next year we'll be skipping.
Next year, we will be skipping.
Construction.
Okay, so it's 2 years before we go back on road construction. Now, in the meantime, before the legislature, some of the wise members there only want bond proposals coming up and even years at the November election. So it could be that we're skipping 2 years to 3 years if they ever pass this resolution.
Only in even years?
There
I have
has
not-
been
Are you aware?
Yes. Yeah, it's absolutely absurd, and the idea is in a presidential election, you get a high turnout, and people will perhaps vote no. Now, I don't expect that they would vote no in Huntington Woods, but if we are precluded from doing bonds on roads until next year, and I'm not proposing a combination, I'm proposing 2 separate items. But if we are precluded, we can, by accident, delay road construction for a couple years, 2 to 3 years.
Worse, delay sewer construction, sewer repairs.
Well, if we approve sewers this year, there's no problem. Because, I mean, once we've got it on the ballot, they can't stop it.
Are you talking about,
The legislature wants to, just as they stop these May elections and stuff like that, and while seniors are away election, they are now proposing that the only time you can go forward, it hasn't passed yet, but they are proposing the only time you can do it is in even years. And if that occurred, no matter what our intent was, we couldn't get any money next year.
There was a bill introduced, and it is, at this point, although the legislature never ceases to amaze me, has died in its tracks because of massive opposition from the cities, townships, and school lobby. And based on data gathered in the 83 counties, folks were able to show the legislature that ballot issues in the November and August elections are actually more likely to fail than elections held, or more likely to pass, my apologies, more likely to pass in August or November than using the May date or odd year elections. So actually what the legislature thought, the reverse, shocking, the reverse is true, and they're more likely to pass in August or November. So I think that's why they pulled back on it, because they realized it wouldn't accomplish what they wanted it to accomplish.
Logic does not
That's why I said they don't amaze, they never cease to amaze me.
our legislature in Lansing or in Washington. And all I'm doing is saying, if you don't do a small thing with the roads, we may really be screwed and move from a great city to a city with good sewers but terrible roads. The roads, to me, are getting very embarrassing. I would like to see somewhere in the nature, we're only doing $2 to $3 million a year in roads. I would like to see us also put that on there for 2 years to protect ourselves. And they've got the winner to determine what those roads would be and contract out.
No, but we would have to know in the next 30 days what roads we were going to do and what the costs would be to do those roads in order to add some type of small millage amount to the sewer levy that we're asking for.
I'm not asking to add it to sewer, I'm asking to do it separately.
But this November?
Yes.
So a separate proposal?
A separate bond proposal. Most of our neighbors are doing 2 bond proposals, whether it's Oak Park, Berkeley, or the school system. They're not doing roads and sewers, but they are doing multiple bond issues.
When we asked Rocco, is this something that you would be able to figure out within 30 days? Or do we already have a running list of the worst roads that need to be,
I've got a list of roads.
yeah, that
You
need,
know, if you just want to mill and repave, you can get a rough price on that. Yeah, we have the study done. Decides X amount what you want to do, or how much you want to put out, and I'll let you know how much you can do with that.
You know how old that study is and who
It was
developed
updated
it?
this year.
well, the PASA ratings were done in 2013. No roads have improved since then.
Right.
So, assuming that they all are declining at the same rate, then it'll give us a good estimate of what roads need to be done first. The funding of the roads was something that the commission had referred to the long-range budget committee. So if you were gonna take that off their plate and do a bond millage now, you need to decide whether to, you know, how much to bond for, or, you know, how.
Doesn't what Jeff is saying make sense? Get something small, keep the project going, because the roads are, you know, at first and foremost on people's minds, maybe less this time of the year than they are in the winter. But I favor that. I think that's a good idea. And I think, like Rocco says, you could be able to get it shouldn't be very hard to figure that out for even deciding what number of blocks or streets, whatever. Let's keep doing it. I don't like the idea that has stopped, because, you know, we spent so much time sitting here trying to talk about ways to keep property values as high as possible. And the sewers are critical, but so are the roads.
And the long-range study committee could still look at the issue, because the question is, how many roads, or how much do you want to replace and what's your time cycle? I mean, to a certain extent, based on the funding that we still had available on the last issue, we basically spread some of that out. We may be able, hopefully, to go at more roads being covered. Obviously, they can't be all in the same area, because you gotta park someplace when they tear up your road. And we maybe have to use 2 contractors instead of 1, and take whoever is the low ball and say to the second contractor within a selected pool, if you will match this, we'll give you this. But that's something that could go to long-range planning. I'm not proposing that we don't do it. I'm just saying, let's get started. Let's cover 2 years. So if the bizarre behavior of the legislature were to pop up, we're not sitting, duh.
When's our next meeting?
What is a reasonable amount of road project dollars that you can do annually?
And like I said, if you wanna use 2 contractors, you could do two techniques. You know, one a mill and a repave,
Yeah.
and then a reconstruct. So you're getting a lot done, and you're getting a lot more done than all reconstruct. Cause some of the roads are millable, and it's fast. And
Doesn't last as long.
it doesn't last as long, but you get a reasonable amount of time out of it, some of the less traveled roads.
What was the bond we just sold, 2 million?
The last one, I don't have it from,
About 2.7.
yeah,
Yeah.
And the
2.78.
total altogether was a $7 million
I
bond?
believe so.
All right, so-
7.7, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So we did a $7.7 million bond, we broke it into three phases, all, let's say, $2.5
No,
million.
2 series, wasn't it?
2 series, yeah.
It was 2 series.
There's one when I first got here. There's been,
Was there 2 sets of 2 series? Was that what it was? I don't remember.
Historically, you guys have you voted about every 5 years, and you do 2 series of bonds for every ballot proposal for roads, historically.
okay. So that kinda gives you a picture, we're doing, how many, the roads we're doing Hendry, Salem, Wareham, and we did Wyoming, and that was about $2.7 million.
You
So,
do not have to define the roads in the ballot.
right,
And us and Miller Campfield, your bond council, kinda, don't like you to do that, because if for some reason
Oh.
you change a road, you can't do that. We like to say, improve streets, curb and gutter, et cetera, and kinda make it,
Keep it open.
keep it open. Don't define the streets and the roads that you're going to do, because if something changes, you can do that.
And we likely can get SEMCOG money, which is available quarterly, to update the PACER ratings on our roads. That basically it's time and driving.
When's our next meeting in relation to the deadline?
We would have to call a special meeting to get all
Deadline
our ballot
for
language in
ballot.
line.
deadline for the ballot to the county clerk is August 14th,
That's the next one.
right?
That's our next meeting date.
Mr. Johnson, you agree? Yeah.
Is it possible, so from what I'm hearing, if we added a $3 million bond issue for roads, that would carry us through the next 2 construction years
No.
approximately?
You just did 2.3, 2.7, how much did we just do?
What they're doing right now is 1.2 million this year for Salem and Henry.
But that's lower than what we've done in the past.
That was 2 years worth of construction though, the 2.7 million.
Mm-hmm.
But if we use 2 different contractors, I think people in the city want the roads repaired more quickly. We have 25 miles, at least what SEMCOG says is a good part of that is in poor condition, whether that's current or based on history. I would rather that we have the ability for 2 contractors for 2 years to do both the milling as well as reconstruction. So I'd rather see us ask for 6 million or 5 million. And move it on and explain to people that we're not gonna go at the slow pace where we got, what, 1.25 miles? Mile and a quarter, and we got 25 miles. So that means in 20 years, we can replace the roads.
Mr. Mayor,
Come on, folks.
my only concern is with the bond issue coming up with the school, are we going to be over asking, what is our,
That's.
That's August.
that is August.
And
So
that's-
there's no
You're
issue.
right,
Yeah.
you're right.
And that is a replacement for bond that's falling off, so there's
Right.
not gonna be a increase in
But people will
the
still
millage
see
rate.
it as an increase. I mean,
It's actually a
But,
slight increase.
what exactly, what would a $5 million, what are we looking at millage wise? If we're doing, it's
Well,
about the
it-
same,
It depends on how long the bond period is, if it's 10, 15, or 20 years.
Yeah, I'm just not comfortable hashing this out on the fly. I think that, you know, I don't want to saddle the residents with some obnoxious millage rate because we want to rush through things. So I think if we can put something together for a special meeting in August, we can look at, you know, as Commissioner Jenks has indicated, you know, a $6 million issue, a $4 million issue, a $3 million issue, and see what we think, what we can accomplish with that amount of money, and how long we want to have the debt for. I also know that as we keep moving down this road, you know, we're going to butt up against our, you know, debt ceiling, you know, as we look at other sewer bonds, potentially fixing pension issues. So I just want to be a little more cautious before I just commit to a dollar amount. We can put something together at the August meeting, different scenarios like we had tonight. Then, you know, we can decide what we want to present to the voters with, you know, ballot language drawn up for each scenario.
And
Is
look,
there, one other thing I would just want, is there a reason why we don't consider a combined millage issue to the community? Roads and sewers?
You know, I've been accused of practicing law many times without a law license or a P number, as Mr. Johnson has, but, you know, Pat McGowan, Miller Canfield, and other attorneys in the state will say, where's your P number? It's my recollection from talking to Pat, and Ms. Sullivan, you can confirm this, I think we need 2 separate ballot proposals, right, for roads and
no,
sewer.
we can do one.
Oh, he did say we could do one? Okay.
I'd
Again, I
rather
didn't go to law
see
school.
2. It gives
Okay. The other thing is,
people the option to say no, and then the risk is transferred.
the other thing that we can do for you is that if you give us some numbers and you tell us when you want to start construction on this stuff, we can kind of feather in or phase in that millage rate so that the impact may not be as great. And when that starts to fall off, obviously, we're getting on the end of the week. Next week, Stephen and I are out of town for 2 conferences. They're both up north. One your city manager's going to. We'll be at both of them. And so the following week, though, we'll be back in. And we could do that, and the following week we can get that stuff to you. So we could have it to you by like August 2nd. August 14th is the deadline, that you have to get the ballot language to the Oakland County Clerk's office.
And you could show us both separate and combined what the cost and what the
And we can
savings
take
would
the
be.
existing, I mean, we can't project, we can project your taxable value out in the future, but it's a projection, it's an assumption. You know, if you're levying, I don't know what you're levying for roads right now, but, you know, if it's, we'll call it 1.2 just to make a number. And we can maybe keep that lower in the earlier years and then bump it when that stuff starts to fall off the roads, so that maybe the impact is less to the community.
So we have a 10, 15, 20-year schedule for just the sewers. Why don't we do the same thing, a 10, 15-year, 20 for 4, 5, and I'll email this to you, but 4, 5, 6 million in roads, and then a 20-year with them combined.
But you do one series for the roads at 4, 5, and 6?
I don't know right now.
Okay.
We
I
have
would
to
think
spend,
not, 'cause we're not gonna spend it
when you
fast
issue
enough.
that money, you have to spend it within 2 years.
Well, 3 years
Three
actually.
from
Yeah.
issue.
But we always like to do 2, because if, let's say you can't get concrete or asphalt.
Right.
Let's say you got bad weather, you know. We've all been in Michigan for many years, and sometimes summer ends in July, and sometimes it ends in April. I mean, if your construction period goes further, we don't want you to get into an arbitrage situation, which means that you can't spend that money within 3 years. Arbitrage isn't a bad thing. It just means that you have to keep track, and there's more administrative responsibility. You gotta make sure that you don't earn more interest than what you're paying. You can't do that in today's market, but you have to prove it. It's an administrative responsibility.
So how fast we use it is also a function of what kind of repairs are done. If we do a complete reconstruct with water main and new curb and gutter, it's gonna take longer. But if we just do mill and overlay, then we can spend it faster, because it'll be, a lot easier to do. So there's a couple of different scenarios. My recommendation, well, of course, we'd like to do the longest repair. What we get the most bang for our buck would be a complete reconstruction. So I will work with the engineers to see how much of the worst Pazer-rated roads they think could be accommodated in the $3, $4, $5, or $6 million range. Because if we need all that money to do the worst roads, we may not have anything left over for mill and overlay. But if it won't take that much money, then we may have some for mill and overlay. So
Well, and since we have the same engineering firm for roads as we now have for underground, they could perhaps highlight for us where we could do the combinations.
sure.
One other thing too, maybe Rocco can weigh in on this, but we know with the I-75 expansion, the cost of these construction materials is significantly higher. It's at a premium right now. Do we see that, is there a benefit to holding off on complete reconstructions a few years to see if that price comes back down, or do you think it's gonna be for the foreseeable future, those
The
prices?
prices right now, that's really high as concrete. Not so much
That'd be the
asphalt.
curbs and,
Yeah, and some of the overlays, of course, you would
Right.
need the curb.
right, okay.
And curb doesn't take a lot of concrete. 10 yards of concrete, you get over 100 feet of curb, so that's one truck. So that's quite a bit, so you can move.
We're gonna
along.
have a
Doesn't
mild
take much.
winter, so we can take it from his salt fund.
There you go, thank you.
Wouldn't count on that. No, I know, that's, no. Manager used to say, we do this in 3 years. So hopefully 1 year it's low, 1 year it's high.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've given administration a pretty good direction, and they've got some work to do. Thanks to our bond counsel for.
from the boss.
Right.
All right, thanks again for your help tonight.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
You know, this was very helpful. And you like to be here.
Now, was it a pleasure this time, or you just being nice?
It's always a pleasure to be in high school.
I think they just appreciate that they didn't stay at item number 10.
I do appreciate that. We do appreciate that, I won't lie.
It's only 5 minutes till item 10.
We were near Battle Creek this morning at 10 o'clock.
So we've covered a lot of the state today.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for getting here, I appreciate it.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now back to original item number 1, which has a few changes, so I'm gonna
Yes.
let the city manager
Sure.
take over.
This is an ordinance, these are some suggested ordinance modifications to deal with two different issues. One is a requirement that pool contractors be licensed in the city, similar that we do for lawn contractors and snow removal contractors. And secondly, to make sure that if pools are cleaned up and the contractors remove the composted material that you usually find at the bottom of the pool or on the pool covers, that they take that debris with them and not leave it on site for, to be picked up by our solid waste contractor. So originally, we were thinking of amending the ordinance that deals with standing water. And after consultation with Carol, we have some different recommendations. So if you will follow along with me, the first red line ordinance in your packet should be the one dealing with Chapter 14, the environment, standing water, and mosquito control. At this time, we are not recommending a change to the definition of debris, since we're not going to be making substantive changes to that ordinance. We are recommending the change to Section 2 of that ordinance. That's just a correction to make sure that the nuisance is handled under the correct section in the ordinance. Am I on the wrong one altogether?
No, you are. Can we still make the one change to garage can lids to garbage
Yes.
can lids?
Yes.
As long as we're in this
Yes,
ordinance?
we will make that type change. So we would recommend changing Section 2 of that ordinance and correcting the typo in Section 1. And then moving to the second red line ordinance, it's Chapter 6, has to do with private swimming pools. There is a new Section 2, this is where the license is required. And then we would add a new section called duty to maintain, and there would be language about swimming pools need to be maintained in working order, need to be either chlorinated or larvicide needs to be placed in the standing water. And we would also add language that says, any person or entity engaged in the construction, repair, or maintenance of a swimming pool shall remove any debris from the swimming pool from the property at the time the services are performed. So we will make typo corrections to standing water and then modify the swimming pool ordinance to require the licensing and to make sure that debris is removed. And if the commission is okay with that, then we would prepare that language for the second reading for the August agenda.
Mr. Mayor, in the swimming pool ordinance, in the new language in 6-431, the last sentence says, the fee for the license and minimum amounts of insurance required shall be established by resolution of the city commission. Are we going to see this at a subsequent meeting then, a fee resolution? I know it's not part of our packet this evening,
It
so.
would be the same fee as we, it would be presented to us, it'd be the same fee as we charge for snow removal and lawn maintenance, which is $15 annual fee.
So we'll need that drawn up then when this second reading occurs.
I have a question. On the first ordinance in regard to the
Standing water
environment standing, yes. Under section 2G, who's gonna pay for Scotia Park violations? We have two pools very often there at the north and south end. Are we gonna do the contractor, or?
So you're talking about the rain gardens?
Yes.
Yeah, we are addressing that in the summer. In the fall, DPW is gonna add under drains, so with
It'll drain
overflows,
faster.
so
Well,
that
but
they,
now let me ask a question.
sure.
If we put in an under drain, are we defeating the whole purpose of the rain garden?
Well, it'll go into the into the sewer system slower, and only when it reaches certain levels, so you'll still have that permeate.
So we're not gonna do the double gravel and filtering in between?
They did do that, it's not working, there's too much clay. So we need a plan B, if you will.
Okay. So whoever repairs that will get they'll get the violation notices if there's a mistake?
We
That
will
would be the
make
case.
sure that.
That's what the neighbors are asking. I'm just repeating what the neighbors are asking.
Okay, so let's go back to the first ordinance regarding the
Standing water.
the standing water. The only change
We'll do
here is the garbage from garage to garbage
Right.
to
And
the
we're,
existing ordinance.
right. And clarifying how a violation will be handled as per section 14-1.
Okay.
Cleanup.
Do we have a motion to accept that and read this as an introduction?
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 2, which we've had some discussion on already, is the swimming pool ordinance. Do we have a motion to accept the introduction as presented by city manager?
So moved.
Second?
Any public comment? Comments or questions at the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll see final versions of those ordinances at next month's meeting.
Yes.
Item number 3. Which we had a new copy of that ordinance at our desk this evening. Regarding home occupations, this is a cleanup of the existing ordinance that the planning commission has asked us to look at. Amy?
Yes, the original home occupation ordinance did not include, let me rephrase that. The new zoning ordinance prohibits certain businesses as home occupations, and added to the new zoning ordinance that wasn't in the prior one is a prohibition for residents to operate law offices or real estate offices within their homes. And the planning commission felt that that was restrictive, and that the prior zoning ordinance, we didn't have any issues with that. So they are suggesting that those be struck from the newest zoning ordinance, and that we retain the language that we had under the prior zoning ordinance. But because it was in the zoning ordinance amendment, there was a public hearing, and the recommendation was to accept that change.
We have a motion to have a first reading of this ordinance, Commissioner.
Second?
Any public comment? Any questions or comments from the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is a matter of a consideration of a 180-day moratorium on the issuance of licenses, certificates, and approvals for short-term rental housing within the city.
Yes, Hank, our zoning official, received an inquiry from an individual that wanted to know whether or not Huntington Woods allowed Airbnbs, and that's something that is not addressed in the zoning ordinance. So rather than make a determination based on language that exists in the ordinance where it's just not dealt with, we are recommending that this be referred back to the planning commission, that they take a look at the impact of short-term rentals on the city and on the residents, and then send a recommendation back to the city commission. So in the interim, because we don't have a way of advising individuals that might be interested in putting Airbnbs in the Huntington Woods, planning commissioners recommended a 180-day moratorium. So if there are any requests, we just indicate to individuals it's being studied, and then wait for the report back from the planning commission.
Mr. Mayor, I would support that we do just that. We'll go along with the moratorium. It's suggested by the planning commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any public comment? Questions or comments from the commission?
Just curious if anything stops someone from renting their home. I mean, I'm not planning on renting my home, but I'm just curious, is there anything that prevents somebody from doing that? Or is it just if they come to ask, we say?
Renting it for a night, like with an
Right.
Airbnb?
Right. Is there anything that currently prevents that from happening?
It's not permitted or prohibited.
Okay.
It's just not addressed. So what we would do in the interim is that if it came to our attention, that we would handle it as a nuisance complaint if that's, what was causing the complaint. But because we don't have an answer, that's why we want this to be reviewed by the planning
No,
commission.
but we do require a certificate if somebody's going to have a rental
Yes,
property.
Right.
If you decide you want to rent your house,
Right.
you have to register that, and the house has to be certified as a rental within the city. The Airbnb stuff, it's a whole different kettle of fish. It's a commercial enterprise, and while you could say, well, it's the same as a rental, not really, because people come, people go. It's different people. I don't know. I know that, for example, in Chicago, with all the condominium units that are there, having looked at some recently, one of the questions that was posed was, well, can you rent it as an Airbnb? The answer was, well, that's within their own contract, their own guidelines. No, was the answer. You cannot, because the neighbors don't want to see they don't want to see transient individual, and not in a pejorative way, but they just don't want to see different people all the time, renting a place. Look, until 10 years ago, nobody ever heard of the word Airbnb.
Right.
And now it's a worldwide phenomenon. But I think the moratorium, when in doubt, don't. And until we have a clear picture as to what this involves and what it entails, and how we, protect the residents and stuff like that, I think the moratorium is the right way to go.
And this, the language for this resolution only impacts rentals of 28 days or less, so we're not interfering with
Right.
individuals that come
Month.
in and get a regular
Right.
landlord license.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, this obviously is becoming more and more popular of an option for folks who travel or vacation. I'm just curious, what are other communities around us doing? I mean, I really think we need to look and see, what is Ferndale and Royal Oak, do they regulate it? How do they regulate it? It might be worth examining what some of our neighbors are doing to sort of guide the Planning Commission in their recommendation back to us.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, consideration and introduction of an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances for the City of Huntington Woods regarding solid waste collection disposal.
Yes, so we are recommending changes to the solid waste ordinance so that the city has the ability to pick up trash if it's placed in the right of way, and if necessary, get it picked up and then charge the homeowner if the city has to do that. What we are seeing occasionally are move-outs, and individuals will leave and then they'll fill up the right-of-way space between the street and the sidewalk with the rest of their furniture and belongings that they don't want, and it'll be in the middle of the week or Friday or Saturday, and of course trash doesn't get picked up till Tuesday, and we don't have an opportunity in our ordinance to have the DPW go out and pick it up and then charge the homeowners for that cost. So that would provide that opportunity in the changes in this ordinance, as well as make it clear that if there is trash on private property that needs to be picked up, that the city can also pick it up and charge the homeowner for that, but there does need to be some notification that is required for going on private property to clean up large amounts of trash. Primarily, this is for move-outs, individuals that put trash out early. If our code enforcement officer is out, we generally issue tickets, but we're talking about large amounts of trash that are gonna make the city really unsightly for a number of days, that we would be able to go in, have the DPW remove it, and then recoup the cost.
Is there a reason why the ordinance is allowing for the notice to require the owner to remove the waste in no less than 2 days and no more than 5 days? Why we're not picking a specific number of days, and who decides what that number is when they're notified?
And that's on private property? That's
The
only on
section.
private property. On
Right.
public property, we don't have to give any notice.
Right,
I think that what the city attorney is looking at is that you need to give them some opportunity to go in and clean it up, but you don't wanna give them an excessive amount of time to clean it up. So they have 2 days that allows them to receive the notification, but if it's not out by 5 days, then that's considered too long, and then we would go in and we would remove it.
so why don't we just say, no more than 5 days? Why are we saying no less than 2 days? It seems to me like we're giving the city manager the option to pick the number of days somewhere between 2 and 5. Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
I think you're reading it wrong. What you're trying to do is give them at least 2 days' notice to get the waste out.
Right.
So that's the first 2 days, and if it's not out by the 5th day, then the city's gonna do it. So everybody's getting the same amount, it's just they'll have at least 2 days to get it out themselves.
Right. We can't go on the property within the first 2 days if they've been notified, but we can if it's not picked up after 5.
Correct.
Okay.
And if it's on public property in the easement, we can just go remove it, and there's
Right.
no issue or with notice there.
Correct.
That's correct, because it's our property.
And that's, in my opinion, that's where you see the move-outs that occur on a Friday or Saturday, the most egregious offenses. And, you know, I've heard from residents in the past where they're having a party on the weekend, and guests are coming over, and there's a move-out next door, and the easement is just cluttered, you know, with trash and furniture, and nobody wants to look at that, especially when you're having an event like that. So this would allow us to go in, remove it, and bill the resident, so or the owner, I should say, and it makes sense.
So do we have a motion to have our first reading of this ordinance?
Second.
Yeah. Do we have any public comment?
I'm not gonna give my name again. Nobody else tonight did. Anyway, I'm Clara Galed.
What's your address?
I don't want you to know, I've just put all sorts of things on the front of my notes. A couple of things. First off, I think that in our solid waste contract, we can have Tringali, for example, come and pick that kind of thing up. It's a clearer way to know exactly what to bill the resident if we're gonna do it that way. And there's an extra charge, it's in the contract, so I might suggest that you add that as an option as opposed to us going and trying to figure out, well, we use half an hour of these people's costs, et cetera, and so forth. And then what is the disposal cost, and all of that. So that's one thing. The other thing is we give people 10 days to cut their lawn. My thinking is that 2 days, a lot of what people need to throw away, people need to be told you need to throw this stuff away, but a lot of what they have can go to the curb and can be picked up by our contractor. But if you get the notice on, and I'm talking about things on private property, if you get the notice on Wednesday, you don't have the option of putting those things out Monday night for Tringali to pick up. It becomes then your responsibility to find somebody really quickly. And I think that we ought to give people at least that much time so that they can avail themselves of a service that's available to the city. And our contractor will pick up almost everything. I mean, there are a few things that they won't, like tires, but that's about it. I mean, there's virtually nothing, as long as it's bundled properly or put out properly, that they won't pick up. So
Then
I
why
think-
wouldn't they just put it out on Monday night?
I said Monday night.
No,
didn't
I
I?
said, no.
That's the 5th day. That would be the 5th day.
Yeah, but I mean, if you notify people and say that you need to get rid of this, you can even put in the notice to them, you know, if you put this out Monday night, if things, and give them a copy of what can be put out, you can put this out Monday night, it will be picked up on Tuesday.
I think she's saying if we give somebody notice on Tuesday, we
Claire,
only give
if
them
I
5
move out
days,
of my
that's
house
I'm not
Saturday,
talking about,
on Thursday,
yeah.
you know.
and I want to clear it out for the next person, so I take everything that's there in the house that's big and put it on the lawn. What we're trying to say is,
Yeah.
this is the person that leaves near the end of the week and doesn't plan on putting it, their question is
I'm
not,
I'm
who
not
will
talking
pick it
about,
up?
I'm not talking about stuff that's put out on the curb. I'm talking about our going in onto private property to pick up stuff that somebody's got junk in their yard. What I'm saying is that I think that I would rather say, let's get that taken care of than try to be punitive. And one way of having it taken care of without seeming punitive is to give them the opportunity to get that material out Monday after 4 o'clock for collection for free on Tuesday morning, or Tuesday during the day. That's my only thing. And I think 2 days, if you happen to be lucky and they give it to you Monday, then you can get it out. But if you don't, if you get it even Friday, you can't avail yourself of that option as it's written right now. And that's my only suggestion, because I think our goal is to get some of that stuff, and I've seen plenty of it in my years with the city, get that stuff out of the people's yards and to the street where it can be picked up. And this is the incentive for them to do it, is you gotta do this or we're gonna come and get it. But it would be, I think, better to give them that option. We give people 10 days to cut their lawn, and we see lawns that are really, really high. My recommendation, or my request to the commission, is that they might consider giving people enough time that they would be able to avail themselves of the free pickup that the city
Will
provides.
Trengali come out on the non-pickup days?
Yes, they will.
So, and how many days' notice do they need?
You could probably call them the day of, and they'll probably get over there that day or the next.
Mr. Mayor, I'm confused. So if they get the notice on Friday, they absolutely can have it out because they have 5
The problem
days
is
to
if
remedy
they-
the situation.
If they get the judgment on Tuesday.
Right, that's about the only scenario where it doesn't work, is if they happen to get it on
or
a Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Or Wednesday.
So you start Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it goes out Monday to the curb.
You could also change the 5 to 7, and that will,
Cover it.
I don't favor that. I want to lengthen the time,
Mr. Mayor.
shorten the time. Remember, this is a blight issue.
Is there any possibility that we could offer a service to residents that are moving out? I mean, it would be at a fee, but saying, look, I know I'm moving out on a Tuesday and I don't have time to put out my garbage and it's gonna be a lot of garbage. Can we arrange with the city to have Tringali come, and what will that, so we could turn it into a contact, are you moving out? Contact the city to make arrangements for Tringali to pick up your waste. It will cost this amount of money. So maybe we can kind of take it from that angle as well, because it is a convenience issue. I mean, if someone's moving out of the state and they can only get their stuff out that day, it might be, I mean, we're still charging them to do so, but we can offer that as a service.
Are they leaving it on their property, or are they putting it on public property?
Well, that, I mean, if it's going to go, if it's something that's, okay, so we call the city, when I lived in Lake Orion, we called the city and said, hey, we've got a big refrigerator we're putting out, when can we put that out? It'll cost you $75, we can pick it up on Wednesday, so we knew we could do that. So if you're calling and saying, look, we're moving out on Tuesday, we're gonna have a lot of stuff going out to the curb, can we arrange to have a pickup, you know, and then pay $350 or whatever the fee is, so that they're not fined, maybe make the fee a little lower than a fine would be, to incentivize them to call ahead and make arrangements.
Yeah,
I don't know,
that's
just
a,
an
that-
idea.
that's a good idea.
Or when they come in to shut their water off, give them a slip at that time, which says this has gotta be out by by either Tuesday or I mean, anytime they make a contact with the city, just give them the information. You're either put it out Monday after 4, or it's
For
your
free,
responsibility. Call the city, and, you know, it's gonna take 1 or 2 days. Let's be city friendly. At the same time, I am uncomfortable with the 2-day notice to whomever the owner is when we stick it on the door. Because if we stick it on the door Friday at 5 o'clock, Sunday at 5 o'clock, they may not be there, but on Monday, usually you've got people. I would rather see 3 to 5. Or as the mayor suggested, you know, up to 5 days.
The other thing too to take note of is there's waste that our hauler won't pick up. And so what we want to avoid is that type of waste sitting for a prolonged period. It doesn't matter when trash day is in those instances, they're not going to pick it up. And so that's also what we need to be, you know, aware of too, because that's a blighted situation, and trying to factor in trash day in the notice is completely irrelevant to situations like that.
If the city manager wants to get an arrangement in place with Tringali that says they'll, on a call from her, that they will come and pick it up, that's fine. That shouldn't be in an ordinance.
No.
That's a service
No,
offered by the
yeah.
city at convenience. But remember, the number one issue is blight. That's the number one issue, and I appreciate the comment about being city friendly, but that's a two-way street. And that means resident, respectful, friendly too, which means I gotta get my stuff out, but I don't think my neighbors are gonna like this if I put it out on Thursday. They're not gonna like that. When I see reciprocity between the resident, what we see with these move-outs, and these are move-outs, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, you know, or the large piece of furniture that's put out and things like that, because it's done on a Saturday, because somebody had friends over or whatever that could help them do that. You know, I get all that, but that is not good government to allow that like that. So I'm fine with the Tringali business. It's a good idea. It's fine, but not in an ordinance. But I'm for keeping the notice periods shorter, and also by, you know, with electronic communication, if we know who the owner of the property is, we have a phone number or an email. It's a matter of a simple call saying, hey, you know, what's the deal here? You can't do this. It's not like we have to post a notice and hope somebody sees it. A simple email can cure that. And now that our code enforcement person is more active and working more hours on, excuse me, on the weekends, that's, it seems to me, an easy fix till I keel over.
Don't make me give you mouth to mouth.
You'll be dead.
Easy there, big guy.
Any other comments or changes that anyone wants, or are we good with this ordinance as it reads?
Good with it as it reads.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6. City of Huntington Woods enter into an agreement to purchase 2 2008 Ford Police Interceptors from Signature Ford of Owasso using the Macomb County Cooperative Bid Pricing, total cost of $75,000.
So move.
Second.
Any public comment?
2018.
Yes. Isn't that what I said?
Maybe I got something blocked here and I didn't hear it, sorry.
We probably need to have as part of that motion that we're entering into an agreement with Curtis Funding Group of Coldwater, Michigan to finance the vehicle purchases for a 48-month period. Is that
Sounds fine.
acceptable to the maker?
So moved.
Yeah, I'll second.
As written on,
Okay. Public comment? Commission, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7 is a matter of considering a contractual agreement for the purchase of 6 Cradle Point modems under the Oakland County Cooperative Purchasing price for a total price of $6,330.
so move, as
Second.
produced in the suggested resolution.
I'll second.
These are for the purpose of, just so that everyone knows.
These are modems in the police car, the laptops that the officers have connect through a modem to Clemmis at Oakland County. The modems are obsolete, so the public safety director would like to replace them now before they
Quit working.
quit working, and then we have to wait to get new ones installed. So this is a proactive measure to make sure that we are always in contact with Oakland County, Clemmis' system. And it is a budgeted item.
Any public comment? Commission, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item number 8. Purchase of a 2019 Ford F-450 truck with attachments in the amount of $70,630
From,
from Signature Ford of Owasso.
so move.
Second.
Any public comment? Commission comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Took us a while to get here.
Yeah.
Said 5 minutes.
We have a vacancy on our Historic District Commission, which I believe is a mayoral appointment with commission approval. Am I right in that?
Yes.
We have one application, so I would like to recommend to the city commission that we appoint Robert LeBeau, who has formerly served on the committee and is willing to serve again.
Can I ask a question? When you, I'm sorry,
Let's get a motion out there first and then. Yes.
Second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. When there are openings on committees, how are you letting people know that there are openings so people can put their names in? Not that I want to be on the Historic District Committee, but I was just curious because I didn't know that there was an interim opening.
The resignation is announced at the commission meeting that created the vacancy,
Oh, okay.
so that's,
So, but do you let the public know that they then can apply for that position?
no, but I do that in November when we're soliciting for a lot of different applications for committees, but that's a good idea that as they come open during the year, I can
Because
simply.
I'm sure I was either at or was listening to a meeting where the opening came available, but I didn't know the procedure for getting my name considered or somebody else's name,
Yep, we could
not that committee,
Do
but
that as needed in the
I think
city's
that's
newsletter,
not a bad
e-newsletter.
idea.
Sure.
Or the weekly blast.
April's, yeah.
Right.
And oftentimes, we go back to the applications if there were folks we couldn't fit onto that committee, but we wanted to, we just pull their application and I'll appoint them, because we've already interviewed them and they seem like a good fit. So I know we've done that in the past too, if we need to find, some committees are harder to fill than others, I will admit.
And this would be to fill the remainder of the term.
Yeah, the vacated term, yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. reports and minutes. We have 4 sets of reports and minutes. We have a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Second?
Any comments or questions? Commissioner Jenks.
Yeah, I want to thank Kim Rowland for adding percentages
You're welcome.
and making this clean. I'll have a couple more suggestions for you. I also want to congratulate Tim and probably Tony as well, because we've again been awarded the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting
You're stealing
for
my
the
news release.
year ending 6/30. What?
You're stealing my news release?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, you asked me if there were any comments. I commented. I'm sorry. You can do your news release now. No, you can't. You got a warrant.
All- Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, reports and minutes are received and filed. Warrant number 339, do we have a motion to accept, subject to full audit?
So move.
Second.
Any comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. City Manager's report.
Sure, the Recreation Department asked me to announce a couple of items. The first is the last home swim meet of the season is this Thursday. They encourage you to stop by and see the Hurricanes in action. It starts at 4:30, so the pool will close at 4 p.m. on Thursday, so residents could take advantage of the Pleasant Ridge Pool on Thursday after 4 o'clock. And we have a new and improved leisure form that will be going out in the mail soon. Publications being mailed to every resident at no cost to the city. Will feature highlights, it'll highlight programs, services, trips, and more that will be of interest to residents 60 and older. This is an effort for us to improve our communication with our older residents. And then the last comment is a reminder that as we're entering the primary season, that political yard signs need to be on the other side of the sidewalk and not placed between the sidewalk and the street in the city's right of way. Our code enforcement officer will move them for a while and then just start pulling them. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the City Manager? All right. Commissioners' remarks. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to publicly thank Lisa Anderson for all her work in organizing the parade and everyone that was involved, whether they participated or organized the events to help celebrate Independence Day. It was a great day, and for the first time, I actually did not run out of candy until the very end. So that was a successful parade, but thank you.
Commissioner Jenks?
There's an informal get-together of seniors on Sundays at the rec center in the senior lounge from 10 to 12. This get-together was moved from Royal Oak. There was a nice turnout last Sunday. Everyone is welcome. The Senior Advisory Committee meets this Thursday, July 12th at 3:30 p.m. here. Again, everyone is welcome. Blood pressure is checked once a month. I think it's the third Wednesday in the morning, but you can verify it from 10 to 12 at the rec center. You can keep a record, you can check and see what's going on. And 11 a.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays, there's water aerobics in the pool. It costs $7 each time, plus you need some kind of senior pass for the pool. Again, I want to thank everyone for participating in the parade. I bought 5 more bags of candy. I still ran out. I want to thank Mayor Gillum for being in the parade, because whenever Mayor Gillum's in the parade, we are guaranteed no rain. So thanks to Ron and Shirley. Finally, it's been hot a lot recently. If it's too hot, use the library during the day, Monday through Friday, to cool off, to read books, to look at magazines, and to see some of the ways that the library's being improved. Look also at the rec center and call them to see if you can stay overnight. But if you do, you have to bring everything you need. The rec center has no cots or supplies for overnight guests.
We actually have a few cots now.
You do now?
Yeah, they were
Okay.
donated by the Women's League.
Oh, great, okay. Other than that, stay safe, it's warm. If you're running at night, you can get reflector strips from public safety. Be a little bit considerate. There's a lot of folks that are not driving cars that believe they own the road, and we don't need any bad statistics for Huntington Woods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to thank Lisa Anderson and her co-chair Charlene Newton for another successful parade. Lots of residents and young folks out to collect the candy. I purchased extra and was fortunate, as Commissioner Iverson stated, to make it through the entire parade this year. Third time was a charm, without running out of candy. I also want to remind, since we won't be having another meeting, to remind our residents to vote in the upcoming August 7th state primary election. Primaries are very important in a lot of districts. They're heavily one party or another, and so the primary will actually decide likely who represents us in either Washington or in our state legislature. So August 7th will be a very important election, and if you're going to be out of town or anticipate being out of town, you can call our city clerk's office. It's not too late to request an absentee ballot and have one sent to you so you can still vote if you'll be out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ozell. Commissioner
Goldman.
No comments. I don't have enough breath left.
All right. As Commissioner Jenks mentioned, the City of Huntington Woods recently received a news release from the Government Financial Officers Association giving us a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. This is something that Tim and the Finance Department should be very proud of. A lot of hard work goes into this. I know Tony probably should get a little bit of credit, but it's your turn now, so this certificate is for you. Be proud of it, display it on the wall, and I'll make sure you get that. I'd also like to thank everyone for their involvement in the 4th of July. It was a great holiday long weekend. We could use a little less on the temperature side of it in the future, but everyone I know had a great time. Thanks to the men's club for picking some great winners in the raffle, and with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. You didn't get that phone call?
What?
You didn't get a phone call? We were a winner?